We will call the Belmont City Council workshop for November 17th, 2025 to order. Before I entertain a motion to set the agenda, there are going to be a couple of changes, one of which we are going to add a closed session to the end of the regular agenda. I think you received that agenda, so at the appropriate time we'll make that motion. The other one I need to announce and apologize for any confusion that may have been generated with respect to item on the regular agenda C1 regarding the Saki Express. For those of you who might have signed up anticipating providing public comments, the public hearing for this item occurred on September 2nd, 2025, at which time council held the hearing. We received public comment from a number of members of the public at that time. We closed the public hearing and we moved on to deliberate on the ordinance. During those deliberations, the applicant had requested that we waive the traffic study requirement. We determined that we would not waive it, and therefore it needed to be done, and then we continued the matter until such time as it was done so that we could receive and ask questions about it and factor that into our deliberations. The upshot of all that is that the public hearing has already been held and has been closed. And so there is no public comment. We've received several emails from folks in the lead up to this. Those have been reviewed, but there is no public comment. The public comment period occurred in September, and we received that public comment, and we will bear that in mind as we continue our deliberations. But as much as I might be inclined to otherwise hear it, I am told that legally we cannot, because no public hearing has been noticed for this evening's meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So we apologize for that confusion, but for those of you who had the opportunity to speak during public comment back in September, those remarks were listened to and recorded as part of the meeting minutes. And obviously, when we receive the traffic study tonight, council will ask questions and take a lot of those concerns that we have seen expressed in some of the emails that we have received into account. So with all of that being said, I would entertain a motion to set the agenda as modified with the addition of new item D1, closed session, and moving adjournment to item E. And removing C1.
Second.
Removing.
Point of order.
I'm sorry, I have a second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the agenda is set. So we move on to item B, consent agenda. We have a small consent agenda item, and I'll turn it over to the city manager for that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. On item B1, the consent item is a request to apply for the North Carolina League Municipality Safety Grant and Property and Liability Grant for 25-26. These grant deadlines, the grant deadline is November 30th, 2025, with the awards to be announced in December. Each grant's a 50-50 matching grant with a maximum award of $10,000 per safety or property and liability. We had reached out to our department heads, and we had the police department to request that they apply for the safety grant for 40 safety jackets. The planning department requests 7 safety jackets. The fire department requests replacing their multi-gas meters. Those 3 are for the safety grant, and for the property and liability grant, the public works department submitted that they would like to replace the bollards at the entrances to Stowe Park. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Any questions about the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Second.
Motion by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. So that takes us into item C2, ordinance for ZA 2025-03, adopting ordinance to rezone parcel 186572 from highway commercial to highway commercial conditional district. And again, to set the stage for this, the public hearing was noticed and held in September. Following the closing of the public hearing, we began our deliberations on the ordinance. Among the areas of relief that the applicant requested were relief from the requirement to conduct a traffic study. Council in its deliberations decided not to grant that relief, but to require a traffic study be done, and then continued the item until such time as the study would be done, that being November 17th. It's my understanding that the traffic study having been completed, we will now discuss the traffic study. However, my recollection from the prior deliberations and what we discussed at the hearing was that nobody had any issues with any of the other proposed areas of relief. If that is correct, we will focus our attention purely on the traffic study here today.
Jim, on that point, I did have a minor question regarding I know we got a lot of detail on like the layout and topography and how the drive-through is proposed to sit down from the elevation of Wilkinson Boulevard. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but have you covered whether there would be any fencing between Wilkinson and the drive-through? Is this?
I don't believe there'd be fencing between I mean, we can.
I don't know if this is the right time.
Yeah.
If I recall, the main buffering concern was behind that.
Right, but it was more of a, yeah, but it was more of a planning strip. I'm just talking about, I mean,
We did briefly talk about the setback on the front part, but I don't think this is overall.
Not in front. We can, I think, return to that maybe when we deliberate.
okay.
Yeah. All right. With all that being said, we'll recognize Chester Jones from the Planning Department to present or at least introduce the traffic consultant.
Are you able to hear me? Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you all for having me. My name is Chester Jones. I will be providing a brief background of VA 2025-03 to catch you up to speed, and the traffic consultant is here to speak to the results of the TTM. Background, council held a public hearing during the September 2nd, 2025 meeting. Council directed the applicant to complete the required traffic study for their proposed project, and Bolton & Mink was selected to perform such analysis. That analysis is now complete, has been provided to you in your agenda package. They are also here to answer any questions that you have in regards to the study.
Okay. We will hear from the consultant. I'm assuming we'll have a number of questions.
Good evening.
Good evening. Dennis, can you describe the purpose of the traffic study and what it's looking for? So specifically, there have been various speed studies also done in this area. Can you discuss the purpose of the traffic study versus a speed study, and whether the speed study was incorporated or accounted for in the traffic study, as well as what the purpose of a TTM is from the point of the applicant? In other words, what are they expected and required to do based on the results of the traffic study, especially if the existing background conditions, even before they undertake their project, are in poor shape, what they're expected to do?
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Purpose of the TTN was to look at future traffic operations without this development. So we'll get into the scenarios that we looked at and compare that to the build scenario. I know, I don't like traffic either. Everything else said.
Talking to the microphone, I don't think we're hearing you.
Is that a little bit better? Let me see if I can raise it up. I'll try to be a little bit closer to it. And we'll compare those two scenarios is what we did. And we identified mitigation, geometrical improvements, signage, whatever that may be, to mitigate the development's impact back to what future operations will be without that development. We had, I believe, 2 speed studies from the police department. You'll see a summary of that in here as well, and analysis of a traffic engineer's perspective of those speed studies.
Okay, and then based on what the traffic study reveals, what then is the applicant expected to do? So if the background conditions are bad, is the applicant expected to fix the bad background conditions, or what's the task that they're assessed based on this study?
Certainly. So they are required per the land development code to mitigate back to whatever the operating capacity analysis indicates. So if it shows a vehicle, put it in rural lameness terms, is going to wait 90 seconds. With the development, it goes up to 95. What mitigation can bring that back down to a 90-second delay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Again, you guys have seen this, but the site plan, we looked at or analyzed this this site plan with a 1 ingress lane and a 1 egress lane. Again, you'll see the intersection of 6th and Wilkinson there on the top of the screen. We also evaluated some internal circulation. Will there be issues with the drive-through? And you'll see that in our findings here in a couple slides. The study area consisted of the Wilkinson and Browntown Road intersection, Wilkinson and 6th Street, and 6th Street and East Catawba down at the bottom of the screen, as well as the site access. These intersections, we met with NCDOT as well as city staff to determine the study area. The trip generation, so this is estimated using the Institute.
Sorry, I had a question when I was looking through this about the inclusion of the Browntown Road intersection. Was that because, did I read that there was maybe a proposed development there too, and we're looking at design, like eventually of that, or why was that?
We are not. So again, that intersection came up during scoping with the city, with city staff, and it was determined that that needed to be it's within close proximity to the project, and we wanted to evaluate that for any impacts.
I think there's supposedly some improvements being done to that intersection as a result of the Morris, which has already been built out. But
Yeah, correct.
so if you see an additional right turn lane, that I think is one of their required mitigations.
That's right.
Yeah.
But to your question about the adjacent development, we did not look at these 2 developments together for the future rezoning. Again, this is a manual compiled of all sorts of trip generation data to be able to estimate trips for new developments. The land use code is 934, which corresponds with fast food restaurant with a drive-through, is what we looked at. You can see estimated to generate 1,684 trips per day. Now, this is very much a worst-case scenario and an overestimate for what the end-user tenant Saki Express would be. Saki is more of a fast casual made-to-order restaurant, but in order to account for the drive-through and the future of this parcel, we wanted to look at an absolute worst-case scenario. Another example here, we estimated trips for the AM peak hour. Saki Express is not open during the AM peak hour. I think they'll project to open at 10:30 or 11. Will not be open during the morning rush hour. But again, worst case scenario, we looked at traffic throughout the day for this one.
And when you have that number, that daily traffic, 1684 trips, Is that for an entire 24-hour period?
Yes, sir.
And is that over the entire roadway distribution network?
Correct. So that would be, evenly distributed across Wilkinson, Sixth Street, Catawba.
So you're not saying that there would be an additional 1,684 trips down 6th Street every day as a result of this restaurant?
No, sir.
That's correct. And we can talk about expected trip distribution later.
Yeah. And to break it down in an hourly standpoint, so 161 trips in the AM peak hour is what was analyzed, about 50-50 entering and exiting, and 119 in the PM peak hour. You'll also see that pass-by trip line. So pass-by trips are, think fast food restaurants, think convenience stores. How often are we leaving our home to go to the convenience store and come right back home? Typically, those are what we call pass-by trips. Vehicles that are already on the road today that stop in and grab, dinner on the way home and continue on their way home. So those were not new trips added to the network, but they were trips that were taken off the network, rerouted into the site, and then back onto the network.
And just to clarify again, when we say 8 and 9 hour, what rooms particularly within the AM period? So we've already established Sake Express will be open after 11, but what do those numbers represent?
So we collected data between 7 and 9:30 a.m. and then 4:30 to 7 p.m. would be the PM peak hour. But these would be in the peak hour within that time frame. So 7:45 to 8:45 or a sliding hour there. Yes. So total new primary trips, 81 during the peak, that bottom row, and 55 during the PM peak. Some more study assumptions, just to set the table. We assume that this will be constructed in 2026. Growth rate, so what level of traffic growth have we been seeing in the area? And we decided on 2%. Adjacent developments, what developments have been approved but not yet built? Where there's traffic we need to account for on the network. The Alliance Bank, I believe, is coming up on Park Road. So that traffic from the Alliance Bank, they had a traffic study done as well. We routed those trips onto the network. Scenarios, so we looked at an existing scenario. What are traffic conditions today with the existing traffic counts that we have? No build, so what is that background growth? The existing traffic counts growing at 2% and adding the Alliance Bank traffic on top. The build 2026, basically that no build scenario with the development traffic. And then per city requirements, we did a build plus 5 scenario, so 2031, 5 additional years of that 2% growth with the adjacent development and with the site trips. The traffic counts we collected, I think I said earlier, we collected those in October of 2025, just last month.
And that was during the weekday?
During a typical weekday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, while schools were in session.
Great, thank you. And the growth rate of 2%, is that based on, say, an industry standard? You didn't just throw a dart at the wall and decide on 2%?
Correct. So NCDOT collects historical traffic volumes along Wilkinson. I believe we had some ADT information along 6th Street too. So throughout the past 10 years, and the development activity that Belmont's been seeing, that 2% is grounded in that calculation. Thank you. We talked about the speed information. We can dig into that. We also collected crash history at both Wilkinson and 6th Street and Wilkinson and Browntown. Looking at Wilkinson and 6th at first, throughout the past 3 years, 22 to 24, there have been 6 crashes. One of those resulted in injury, 1 possible injury, and 4 property damage only. There was also speed studies like we talked about. There was one that's not on the screen, but one done for a whole week in end of August, early September. And then this one was done for 1 day on November 3rd. The average speed, again, supposed to speed limit on 6th Street is 20 miles per hour. The average speed during that day was 20 miles per hour. The 85th percentile speed was 26. So obviously there's going to be some going faster than 26, some are going to be lower than 20, some might be turning right. So again, it's an average of vehicles traveling down 6th Street. The week-long study that happened in August as well had similar results. It had an 85th percentile speed of 21 miles per hour. The police department on the report said they'll be continuing to monitor the area as well. The Wilkinson and Browntown has a little bit more of a crash issue. We've talked about this with NCDOT as well, and they are aware of it and are looking at improvements there. There has been 1 fatality in the past 3 years, 1 injury crash, 8 possible injury, and 16 property damage. So get into the capacity analysis results.
And you also looked at crash data for 6th and Church, did you not?
We did, and I guess we didn't focus on that here. I can.
Well, if I recall, there were no accidents.
No accidents, thank you. Get into our capacity analysis results. Again, just highlighting a couple of areas where between that no build capacity analysis and the build capacity analysis, what approaches and what movement delays increased beyond a point where the applicant needed to identify recommendations to mitigate that. One was starting with the Wilkinson 6 intersection. The westbound left turn movement degraded from what we call level service E to level service F. If you have any questions around what level service means, please let me know. And then the northbound approach was a level service F during the no build and continued, and that delay increased with the introduction of site trips.
Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Certainly. So these are within what we call the highway capacity manual. It's a way of estimating, given geometry, given traffic volumes, number of lanes, has calculations to calculate basically a delay for the intersection, a control delay, how long between slowing and stopping and continuing to go, how long is a vehicle on average going to be delayed compared to a free flow movement. And the level of service grades are basically broken down for public consumption, level of service A being essentially free flow, level of service F, being there's capacity issues and there's not enough capacity at that intersection. I will say at a stop controlled intersection of a major highway like Wilkinson, level of service F is very common, and whenever you have left turns crossing 6 lanes of traffic, it's going to be a high delay per that HCM calculation, highway capacity manual. To give you a little bit more insight, NCDOT, when they're planning STIP projects, they're looking out into 2040, and they design their future STIP projects to a level service D. So obviously kids don't get a D in school, but a D from a traffic operations standpoint is acceptable in DOT eyes.
It's that part, look. There we go.
And these are the impacts with the build scenario.
With the build scenario, correct. So, to get into the proposed mitigation of what we identified and spoke about in the report, Wilkinson and Browntown. So, also looking at the existing safety issue, DOT is evaluating that intersection now. There was just a westbound right turn lane, there is soon to be a westbound right turn lane that was identified by adjacent development, I believe you said the Morris. That will be installed.
I think it's called.
The Rotary. We'll be installing that. The failing approach to that intersection is the southbound. Everyone making that southbound left, avoiding the Park Wilkinson intersection. So the Saki Express added 2 vehicles there in the AM peak. Again, Saki Express will not be open to AM peak. And during the PM peak, added 1 new trip within that hour. So we analyzed a couple improvements there. Ultimately, it was decided that due to the very minimal amount of traffic that the Saki Express is expected to add to that intersection, no improvements would be identified on behalf of their development. The 6th Street and Catawba operated efficiently during both those scenarios and no improvements identified. The Wilkinson and 6th Street, so the graphic there on the right, again, that northbound approach, as well as the westbound left. Mostly in the AM peak, but as well as the PM peak. Increased in level service and delay to a sense that you need to identify a recommendation or mitigation. So we are recommending a left turn restriction from 6th Street onto Wilkinson. Again, everything we do as traffic engineers is a balance between safety and access. So does restricting left turn movements zero out that left turn delay? Yes, because there's no one turning left there, and would force a U-turn movement. That can be done a couple different ways, whether with no left turn signage, concrete median, Any sort of intersection project there will need to be permitted and approved by NCDOT, since that is their intersection in Wilkinson's their roadway.
If that were restricted to no left turn on Wilkinson, there would be signage at the exit of the development noting that there would be no left turn on Wilkinson, so you don't have to wait till you get there, then find out, oh no, I can't make a left here.
Typically not at the, I'm trying to think, normally any signs added within the public right of way would need to be something that's in the manual of uniform traffic control devices. So I'm throwing a lot of manual names out there. But typically that wouldn't be something that would be shown at the development access. That would just be at the intersection of 6th and Wilkinson. Another, at the site access, again, we studied it with just one ingress and one egress lane. There are benefits to the 3-lane section, whether that be 2 egress or 2 ingress. With the ingress, folks coming into the development, in the event that the drive-through lane backs up to the driveway, folks can still enter and park and walk in. With 2 egress lanes, if there's a queue turning left, waiting to get to the intersection of 6th and Wilkinson, folks are able to still access, turn right from the site, and make their way back to where they're going, whether that be behind the site on Fuller or continue back down 6th Street. I believe the applicant sees more benefit from their site with the 2 ingress lanes. But I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. But that is a summary of the technical study that we did.
Questions for Bolton and Mink?
So I know that the ingress and egress lanes was a point that was raised in the previous meeting, particularly about if you had dining customers who come, if there were 2 lanes of ingress, then one could go off to the left and park, the other one could continue on the drive-through. Is that kind of the thought behind having 2 ingress?
That's right, exactly. So that, the drive-through aisle, since people are still able to get access to parking.
Just key there, because I think that's what we see in some of the other locations, is that you're not gonna have to wait behind the staging, cars that are staging to go in to order something to go, right? So you have like immediate access, unblocked to the parking lot for a second. Yeah, and that was one of the big safety features that was brought up last time, which is why they did initially do it from what I understood from our planning and zoning staff. Did you guys review that in regards to one car going off to the right to the drive-through, and one going directly straight to the parking lot? Did you guys see any major concerns with that?
We did not. We looked, like I said, we looked at a little bit of internal circulation. Where the pickup window is, there is a stop bar, so they will be stopped before they proceed out. And there's enough of that called driveway throat or neck to be able to maneuver around those 2 ingress lanes.
Okay.
Walking out of the restaurant, they're gonna have to cross those lanes to get to their cars, right?
Certainly. So, I did notice on their site plan, there was a crosswalk. I think that will just come with awareness. I understand any sort of drive aisle in a parking lot is, there's gonna be some conflict there, but I don't see from a site this type with the drive-through be able to account for that. And I don't, the 2 ingress lanes, don't necessarily increase that risk for pedestrians.
Their old organization had that, right, where you come out and you have to go across the parking lot. But you mentioned something that this was a more aggressive approach when you were looking at this. What do you mean by that? Because there's some definition between fast casual and then like a true traditional fast food restaurant. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so I mentioned the IT land use, IT trip generation manual. So there's hundreds of different codes to estimate traffic. There is a fast casual land use code that is generally about half of the trips that the fast food restaurant does. And there is a stipulation there that it may or may not have a drive-through. So between that and then also looking, we did have the applicant provided former transaction data, the previous Sake Express location. So comparing those two and that full fast food, think Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, high turnover, pre-prepared meals, it's about half of what we
Are
anticipate.
you comparing the current location where Saki is or the one near Culver's?
The former one that had the drive-through.
Okay.
So we're saying 1684 on the more aggressive approach, but then you're saying 840 with the more fast casual would be less than the 840 considering there wouldn't be any peak hours, or does the 840 account for that?
840 would account for that.
Okay.
So I think maybe a higher lunch peak and maybe an extended PM peak potentially, but
Again,
again,
that would be dispersed everywhere, not necessarily to one isolated area.
that's correct.
Any other questions?
Do you see any downside to, I think you may have touched on one, but a downside to only having one egress lane?
Downside to only having one egress lane. What could happen, during a select time of the peak hour is if, go back to this site right here. If the queue from 6th Street and Wilkinson extends to the driveway, and someone is turning left out of the site, they have nowhere to go, that could, cause internal issues. Again, from that sense, it's not, affecting the public right of way, because it's an internal queue. And it would just be, a select peak hour.
Presumably, if left turns were restricted on Wilkinson, that would minimize the likelihood of that happening, correct?
That's correct. And I might also add, during our traffic data collection, during the morning peak hour, there's 180 vehicles turning right from 6th Street onto Wilkinson. There is that, some of that might be local traffic, a lot of that is traffic avoiding the intersection of Wilkinson and Catawba. With the intersection project there, I haven't looked at the traffic analysis for that, but just seeing the geometrical improvements will significantly, lower delay for that northbound right to go over the bridge. So I see and we didn't account for it in the study, but I see with the completion of that project, there'll be a much less, or a much lower amount of cut-through traffic on 6th Street.
So that was my
I'm sorry, proceed.
Can you elaborate on that, though?
Well, so just real quick, because that's what I'm saying. So the Wilkinson Boulevard improvement plans that are happening right now, that's not factored into the overall proposed analysis,
It was not, no, because we did not specifically study the intersection of.
but that particular intersection, as you get closer to the bridge, should improve, again, overall traffic flow, particularly with respect to drain off 6th Street. Is that what you just said?
Looking at that intersection of the network, I think it will lower traffic volumes along 6th Street.
Because there's no left turn.
Well, I think that particular intersection is going to be an overall improvement closer to the bridge, which should have traffic flowing quicker as opposed to people supposedly coming to the 6th Street cut through is what I believe the NCDOT's intentions
I
are.
think the cut through going to the restaurant is where we're gonna have the issue. People are gonna take 6th Street, I mean, personally, I'm gonna shoot straight through 6th Street to go there. I'm not gonna go down Wilkinson, turn left, turn right, whatever. And then when I leave, yeah, if that's the only route, and so be it, but
I think what he was suggesting now is that the improvements to 74 and the bridge, for the people that seek to cut through right now, Catawba Street, to make a right on Wilkinson, when these improvements are installed at Wilkinson and the bridge at the Catawba Street intersection, are you suggesting that some of that cut-through traffic would then continue down Catawba Street to make the eastbound turn on Wilkinson?
I believe that would be
what I'm saying is Belmont traffic's gonna take East Belmont straight to 6th Street and go to Saki. That's gonna be the route for majority of our town. They're not gonna go down, have parking. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Saki, but I think about the old restaurant with the drive-through. We were backed out.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I was sitting in line at College Park to turn to get in to there. So I just think about, it's not so much the flow after they get out, it's the flow to the restaurant. And I know how crowded it is in the afternoons, and especially dinner time. They're gonna be coming through Sixth Street, waiting in line, back up, down. Gotcha.
You're gonna do one of two things, you're gonna go Catawba down Sixth Street, or you're gonna go down Wilkinson and make a left across, because you're gonna be coming home from Charlotte, you're gonna make a
Right,
left
people
turn
from, right.
on Wilkinson to Sixth Street, that's my main concern.
And there's
From a safety.
two speed bumps on Sixth Street. I'm not so much worried about the speeding because it's just gonna be backed up, but I know there's speed
Oh, yeah.
on Sixth Street, no doubt.
Well, I think that's a good point, because too, if I recall last time, maybe this is a question for the applicant, but they have additional spaces for the loading zone. Because I know what you're talking about. Whenever you were going to the old location, it wasn't uncommon for those cars to be prepped for loading outside of their property, right? In front of the Culvers. But we asked that last time, and I believe the answer was, maybe it's for the applicant, that they're gonna have additional spaces for those cars so that it's not coming out as bad as it was, or coming out at all. And if they are, then at the time, that'll be, I guess, up to the officers to regulate.
But I think mainly
So for the
the,
loading zone of the actual, so you're going to get your order, you place your order. There's more space, is how I understood it, for those particular cars, for the loading
no,
zone to
you're
get
absolutely right.
the
I would
food.
say Sixth Street is gonna be the way it's occupied. Anybody that lives from East End, Southland Road, they're gonna shoot down East Belmont, Sixth Street to Southland. Unless they're coming home from work.
Do you have any safety concerns with anybody coming from Charlotte, making that left turn on Wilkinson to Sixth Street, across the 3 lanes of traffic?
I've driven through that and between that and also the existing crash history. Those crash numbers are not eye level to
Well,
raise
there's nothing
concern.
there right now. We're talking about when there's a sign
Well,
there. That's my concern.
Yep.
You'll have to go up and take the U-turn, right, to get back down. You're going to cut straight across.
From Wilkinson, you're able to turn left
Turn
onto
left.
Sixth Street. And
That's my concern, is the queues not back up on 74. Somebody's gonna turn left and their whole car's gonna be sitting out sideways on 74, just prime T-bone.
yeah. So we did have a queuing analysis, and there's between the signal at Park and Wilkinson, providing gaps in traffic with the signal timing, and just a directional split. That's specifically it, and I went out there today, there's plenty of sight distance looking, both left and right. I don't see that as a major concern.
Please, can we control the outbursts? Any other questions for the consultant? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, I know you have a list.
Well, I do have some questions. So basically, if I understand what you're saying here correctly, the expected trips being generated by this project are, and the data that you provided here on page 11 regarding the 1684 and the AM and the PM peak hour trips, you're saying that's not representative of this proposed tenant, but it represents the maximum trips that can be generated by a fast food restaurant, with the actual trips that will be generated by Saki being lower than what was analyzed in the TTM. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to talk about trip distribution a little bit
Sure.
and pass-by trips. Is it not possible that pass-by trips, so like you're traveling west down Wilkinson during the PM peak hour, everyone's traveling west, and you turn left into the development, or into the project,
Right.
would it not seem like a lot of people might, I don't want to turn left, I hate turning left.
Sure.
Things like, I get very nervous and people behind me are honking and I don't want to deal with it. So is it not conceivable that then they go back down 6th Street towards Catawba Street to continue to get wherever they need to go rather than try and turn left
Are
down?
you saying coming to the site?
for leaving the site.
leaving the site, so instead of turn left. So correct, yeah, there's a network, you can go around the site, access back on Fuller, you can come down, potentially come down.
So like they're turning left to get in, it's the evening, you wanna get dinner. You turn left to get in, then you come out.
Sixth Street.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you're continuing, so your way is this way, because that's the way you're going west. You're continuing west down Wilkinson, but instead of turning left to get back onto Wilkinson, you say, well, I'm gonna find a light, I'm gonna find something else. So instead of going that way or even trying to do a U-turn, you go down Catawba. Is that not feasible? Down Sixth, I'm sorry, down Sixth Street, yes. To get to Catawba and some other route.
Yeah,
I believe there's a restriction on the left turn.
Yes.
Absolutely, there's
Okay.
multiple ways someone can get around.
And so I think if I looked at your trip distribution and your expected distribution out of the site, I think it's figure 8. You anticipate 80% leaving the site would turn left and 20% leaving the site would turn right. Overall, I mean, that's not, is that, like, walk me through that, how you arrive at that
So,
figure?
we look at a multitude of different things when we're determining trip distribution. One is where are the traffic volumes today? So Wilkinson obviously carries 25,000 plus vehicles per day. Sixth Street is under 1,000. I don't have the exact number on the page in front of me. So obviously those trips are coming from somewhere, and those vehicles are on the road today. So where, based on engineering judgment, the street network, what is the fastest way for someone to continue back to their final destination and move on? If that is down Sixth Street or north on Sixth Street, turn left on Wilkinson.
I just, I struggle with that somewhat, that, I mean, I understand analyses and everything, but, as a practical matter, do you really think it's gonna be 80-20?
No.
Well, for example, if you're coming down Wilkinson, I guess it all depends on where your final destination is. Obviously we know Wilkinson and Wilkinson and Park has capacity issues. Ultimately, it's generally from a network perspective where's going to be the least path of resistance for people to go, and that's how we develop these, and we're approved by city staff, and typically it would be DOT as well, but they do not do this.
On a percentage basis, I would agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I think that number's gonna be much higher turning right onto, as a percentage, on Sixth Street. But I think the overall number is going to be much less than the 1684, as we talked about. I mean, the inbound trips alone, you can sort of extricate those from the total because 80% of those are coming from Wilkinson, right? So the overall total number is going to be less, but I think the overall percentage coming out of the restaurant is definitely going to be
I think
going
it's gonna be the other way.
right on Sixth Street.
80% going right.
It's only going to be higher than 20. I think that's safe to say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just as from a capacity analysis standpoint, Sixth and Wilkinson is kind of the problem point of the network. And, additional traffic coming down Sixth Street, we didn't see capacity issues at East Catawba or, East Catawba and Sixth. So certainly there is capacity there to allow for additional traffic. And there is the speed studies that have been completed. I know there is desire for additional traffic calming, different things. That could be a way to mitigate that as well. So.
Okay, and so my next question would be regarding additional peak hour trips as a result of the development. And it seemed, I think I'm looking at figure 9, it seemed as though you're saying that you expect there to be 20 new trips turning left out of the development and 5 turning right to go down Catawba Street during peak PM hours. Is that correct?
Correct. That is from the primary trip assignment, and then there will be additional from the pass-by.
Okay. Well, explain that to me, because it looked like with the pass-by, I didn't see any being assigned to going right out of the development.
You're correct, so all pass-by, there wasn't assumed that there's any pass-by trips on Sixth Street today. All those pass-by trips would originate and come from Wilkinson, so they would return back toward Wilkinson.
I'm not, I don't know about that. I'm a bit skeptical on that. And then I also see that you anticipate an additional 6 trips coming up 6th Street and turning left into the restaurant during PM peak hours. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm on, well,
68?
68. Yeah, 68, 69. All right, well, those are all the questions that I had, although I do have some for staff as a result of this presentation. Are there any other questions for Bolton Link? All right, thank you. No one here has ever truly done those, so we might call you back up as we deliberate.
Thank you.
Mr. Cook. Thank you. But I do have questions for staff based on this.
Would you like to hear from Ms. Murphy, the transportation? Would you like to-
Well, my question is specifically more regarding one of the proposed areas of relief and mitigation that the consultant was recommending, that being the left turn restriction. And I've heard from some folks concerned about that, but my understanding based on the staff report is that you do not necessarily agree with that recommendation, or that you have perhaps some alternative means of implementing those concerns. So
Sure.
if you could elaborate.
Absolutely, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So yes, as was discussed, there were 2 primary mitigations that were proposed. One being the addition of another lane at the site access to create that 3-lane section rather than a 2-lane. What's in the study is a second egress lane, which staff supports, although we would also support a second ingress lane for the reasons described earlier. But then up for kind of a different discussion is the 6th Street and Wilkinson Boulevard intersection. The left turn restriction from 6th Street onto Wilkinson does require some sort of intervention to mitigate the projected impacts during the AM peak period. I will note the PM peak does not cross the threshold into requiring mitigation. So for a site that's just operating during the PM peak hours, that's kind of the basis of staff's recommendations. Just for that left turn movement onto Wilkinson. So not necessarily for left turns from Wilkinson onto 6th, as was mentioned earlier. In the TTM, one mitigation that's suggested is a leftover intersection, which basically takes traffic kind of across the median or what would be a median area, and whether through the use of modular materials or concrete, prevents any other traffic from crossing out of the side street onto 74, but allows traffic to make a closer left turn and gives them kind of a protected area to do so from Wilkinson onto 6th Street. So that's what's described in the study. I will note that at that location, there are some right-of-way constraints. The existing median and the existing additional buffer area within that median is quite narrow, and so it's likely that widening would be required in order to install that, or additional right-of-way needed from the private property owners in that vicinity. Sure.
Sorry, did you say staff's recommendation or the conclusion was that no mitigation during the PM peak hours? but
At this
recommending mitigation
location.
At the AM peak hours?
So, right, per the land development code, mitigation by the development is required when essentially it's if volumes or delays are being increased more than 25% of the existing delay, or if they are a D, E, or F level of service, and they're worsening.
But wouldn't that exist now?
Not in
In the
the
AM?
PM peak. In the AM peak, yes, and it's worsening, so that's why mitigation is required. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if memory serves from the traffic engineer's presentation, the AM addition to
The AM,
For left turns?
sure, it comes down less to the number of trips that are being added and more to the quantifiable delay increase.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So those extra handful of trips, while it's a very small number, because, and Aaron mentioned this earlier, right? But when you have a side street that is only controlled by a stop sign, you don't have a traffic signal controlling that, so you don't have, specific phasing where cross traffic on 74 is stopping to allow that left turn movement to happen. Those cars can sit there for quite a while, waiting for that opportunity to cross those several lanes of traffic to keep going. So that, I believe, I don't have the study in front of me, but I believe that delay was expected to increase very significantly during the AM peak for that left turn movement.
But that is based on a standard fast food restaurant, and we have discussed that this particular applicant would not be operating during AM peak hours.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So this applicant is not proposed to be operational during that AM peak, which is the caveat that we wanted to make sure council was aware of.
So you're saying that the normal AM peak hour, let's say traffic going into Charlotte to work, that's gonna be offset, or you're not gonna have that in the PM, right?
Mhm.
And so the delta between the two is not enough to recommend mitigation during the AM peak hours. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? Or
Not necessarily. So what staff's getting at is if the site is going to operate during the AM peak, it's anticipated that to mitigate the delays that would be caused by folks trying to turn left out of 6th Street
right,
on Wilkinson, we would need to do something to address that
so
delay.
they're not.
But they're not going to under this proposed site.
So you say that under this proposed site plan, is there the ability to put a condition in there that if it was to change this type of use, that we could then revisit this? Because that is
Certainly.
something of concern, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that staff looked at and included in your recommendation that we shared on Friday, is that, if council feels it's necessary, I would encourage you to seek consent from the applicant. There have been some back and forth discussions over the last several days about whether the applicant would support that condition of approval or not. But that would be one way to address those concerns, would be to require that, for example, if the hours of operation were to change such that the site was going to operate during that AM peak period, perhaps they would be required to amend the conditional zoning or reconsider the mitigations that are going to be required by council.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, but, in any conditional zoning, we need the consent of the applicant. So we can discuss it. I'm assuming, if I read the staff report correctly, that the applicant has no issue with the addition of the second egress lane as an additional condition.
I don't believe so. I will defer to the applicant. I don't want to speak on their behalf.
Okay,
And the applicant is present.
yes. Well, but, we have specific questions, but just like with everyone else, the applicant had their opportunity to present back in September, so I don't need another presentation
Sure.
from them either, so.
Absolutely.
We will see if at some point we'll need to see whether they agree to any additional conditions we may want to impose in the deliberations,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it's not an opportunity
To represent.
to
Absolutely.
replow ground that's already been covered.
Sure.
All right, that was just my question, was that, notwithstanding the recommendation based on, this particular applicant's
Yeah.
characteristics, you are recommending, some alternatives as opposed to the leftover restriction
Sure.
that was recommended in the
Yeah, and I will note, so the leftover restriction or the proposed design that's described is according to NCDOT standards. The alternative that the applicant has proposed is installing signage, as the traffic engineer described, that states the left turn restriction during the AM peak period. And staff feels that in this case, especially because the site is not operational during the AM peak period, that would be sufficient to address the concerns. But I would also note that that's not been reviewed by NCDOT. So while the leftover intersection is an acceptable intervention that NCDOT uses and deploys, we would just need to confirm NCDOT approval of an alternative to that.
Okay.
but that's kind of regardless of what the intervention might be, so.
All right. And if I read the report correctly, if the applicant agrees to these additional conditions, then staff have no further concern with the traffic generation
That's right.
and traffic safety. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Reagan?
Yeah, I've got a few.
Sure.
Would there be any support at all for a caution light at that intersection of Wilkinson and Sixth Street?
Like flashing yellow and red or.
Particularly maybe during, I suppose maybe for the entirety of the day. If we're saying no left turns in the AM peak, obviously we want to increase recognition there that there may be more. Well, I guess if you're restricting no left turns during the AM peak, maybe you don't need it on then, but particularly during the PM peak. If you're going to permit left turns there, would there be support for a caution light?
I would defer to the traffic engineer to speak to that. Since it's not mentioned in the study, I don't want to purport to, know whether that would be, something that's required or something that would help mitigate the potential impacts of the project. I do want to remind council, and it's been mentioned, but under North Carolina law, we can only require the developer to mitigate the impacts they're directly causing. So I just want us to be mindful of that as well.
Well, this development would be causing increased
Sure.
trip count.
Sure.
Potentially increased left turns onto Wilkinson, so I think there's a nexus there, but,
Sure.
What about, compliance with our new Vision Zero plan?
Mhm.
How do you see that? I know it complies with the comprehensive land use plan and solve that, but what about Vision Zero?
Yeah, so we reviewed the site plan for consistency and compliance with the Vision Zero plan and the comp plan and the new multimodal plan. At the time, of course, this was just before those new plans were adopted, but we still looked at the recommendations within those plans to provide feedback to the applicant on compliance. And it was determined that the site plans as proposed were compliant with all of those long-range plans.
Okay. The last question I have right now, and maybe this is something directed to Chief, but are there, irrespective of the speed study results, are there any additional measures that we could add along Sixth Street to increase visibility for pedestrians or to reduce the opportunities for speeding? I know we've got 2 speed humps there now, we've got a 4-way stop,
Sure.
I believe, yeah.
Mhm.
Any additional measures, even if they weren't recommended from the speed study, I see Chief coming up, that we could add, sort of arbitrarily in this case, given sort of some of the unique circumstances of the.
There are certainly options, and I think Chief will speak to kind of our palette of the different options we consider when we look at speeding complaints and what sorts of traffic calming measures we can require or implement to address those things. One thing I will note that is not on the site but nearby, our Abbey Creek Greenway, which is proposed to extend across 6th Street and go east towards Kevin Lofton Park, is proposed to cross 6th Street at a mid-block crossing with a high visibility crosswalk and a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, like the one that has recently been installed out here on Catawba Street. So it would be a pedestrian activated button that folks would press, and then you get the blinking lights to attract the attention of drivers and stop traffic so folks can cross that crosswalk. So that's one intervention there to allow for a more pedestrian friendly environment that is already recommended in our long range plans.
Got it, thank you. Chief,
Yes, sir.
I have anything to add?
I wouldn't say that it would be necessary, but I think we have increased traffic calming in the area over the years. If you wanted to look at putting another speed hump, speed table, or whatever you want to call it, there, I wouldn't be opposed to that. If you think that would help with some of the speeding, just like the different studies, I think we did 6 studies there, speed studies, and there are some people speeding, but not atrociously. Continue to monitor the area and continue to put our speed monitoring device out there and have some visibility in the area. But if you were wanting to put something else out there, we've already addressed all the speed calming issues, large truck traffic and everything. But I think I wouldn't be opposed to looking at that in the future.
Do we have the signs, no through truck traffic posted?
I've been on training, I do know from going to training this morning in Monroe that the ones from 10th Street are changed, so I'd have to refer that to Public Works.
Okay, because as we know, that's now codified, no through truck traffic down 6th Street, even though I think we had designated that several years ago, but it's now codified, so.
And also in the GPS, I guess.
Yes.
It's all in the official
Yes.
format. So
It's
that-
been in the GPS, we just didn't have it in our ordinance officially. Is there any more questions?
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, may I ask a question?
There are no questions from
I
the
just wanted to see
audience.
if you had a copy of their speed studies.
No, there's, we've,
Okay, I was gonna give you a copy because I have them here if you need them, but I don't think 53 miles per hour
Yeah, I think-
is not excessive.
we have speed studies on.
Okay,
there,
that's
so,
what I was trying
all
to
right.
find out, thank you.
Any
Yes.
questions for me?
Any further questions from Reagan?
I mean, I think also just to confirm here for my peace of mind too, because we're looking at this as the project at hand, but what could the project be if it's not a Saki Express, right? Could you maybe talk through that? Because
Sure.
again, we have to keep in mind that land is not always just gonna be undeveloped as much as folks would want it unless someone buys it.
Well, I will point out, it is something like that.
It's a storage
Yes,
unit, but
yes.
what could it be? It sounds like the owner does not want it to be a storage unit, so what could it be, I guess is what.
Are you asking based on the current zoning of the parcel?
Correct. Yes.
That, I would ask planning staff for some help speaking to that, as I'm not the
Well, you
project
are
planner
planning
on
staff.
this. I am, but I am not the project planner on this
Okay.
project specifically. I will note though, under the traffic study that was done, and the traffic engineer mentioned this, but the traffic study covers up to that most intense version of a fast food restaurant with a drive-through, right? So the study that you're considering, considers up to, let's say, a McDonald's or something similar
Yeah.
that's got a drive-through.
That would draw more
So,
traffic.
right,
And I
so
would
the
also-
traffic impacts.
Point out that regarding we can talk about what it's currently zoned, and obviously there's a self-storage facility there, but as this is conditional zoning, I would assume in the conditions, it is going to say it's a fast food,
Sure.
fast casual. So if they wanted to change it to something else, they would have to come back and change the conditions were it approved. If they wanted to turn it back into a storage facility or anything, they couldn't just do that. They'd have to come to us to.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
see, if this was denied.
Right.
What could
Ah,
go
yes. Okay, yes. No.
Sure, so this property is currently zoned highway commercial, which means that it is the least restrictive in terms of allowances of future potential uses. I will also note there are a variety of uses, including drive-through, that don't always trigger coming through you to conditional zoning. And one prime example of that would be the Chipotle in front of the Aldi. So what's different in that particular instance is that the drive-through is limited to, it's not customer place order and pickup, it's just limited to pre-order pickup, so it's not considered to be a quote-unquote drive-through in terms of trip generation. But there are still the potentials for restaurants of very similar scales to be located within highway commercial by right if they do not need relief from any other provisions of the ordinance. It can also include some of the other uses, both typical office and retail. It could include a tattoo shop. It could include a car. If it was 2 acres or more, it could include a car lot. There are a variety of uses. So Chester's pulled up the full list for me. Permitted uses, retail, restaurants, private nightclubs, entertainment, adult establishments, like plasma, daycare.
Multifamily apartments?
Multifamily is allowed by right on Wilkinson as long as it doesn't trip any other reasons for needing a traffic study. So if it's a smaller scale multifamily, it could be allowed by right here.
Can you explain by right real quick, just?
Sure, so by right means that somebody could come in and work with staff to do administrative approval. And that means that the project would not have a public hearing or public meetings or community meetings. We would still, it's important for us to make sure that people know that there is a proposed development. So those development signs are provided on sites where there's proposed developments, whether or not it comes before council, just so that people can have some awareness. And we've gotten positive feedback about that, just to let people know to call our office if they see those signs, if they have any questions. But certain projects can proceed through the development process without coming to planning board or city council. Others come directly to city council, and then others are just done by our staff. So when we say by right, we mean they've met all of the provisions and regulations outlined in the land development code, they don't need relief, and they can just work with staff directly to make sure that they're in compliance.
Think the Chick-fil-A on
Yeah.
the Harris Teeter.
And if I recall correctly, we don't have to go back down the rabbit hole, but there's potential other parcel that's for sale or looking into consolidation here, which could potentially lead to an even larger project than what's being proposed here tonight.
You mean with one of the adjacent parcels?
Correct. So the way I look at it is that we also have to be careful when we're looking at these types of what else could happen. It could be something that doesn't even come to us and is a higher chip generator than this, right? So for me, it's trying to weigh, because again, obviously they don't want it to be a storage facility anymore. So it's not going to be a storage facility, right? So that's just that idea on just want people to realize what it could potentially be, other than a fast casual restaurant that's opened up during lunch and PM peak hours.
Sure. Any other questions for Reagan? All right, thank you. So we've run out of people to ask questions of, so I think we need to return to our deliberations. Hearkening back to the beginning of this topic, I think, was it Jason, you had one additional thing on the other areas of relief before we get to traffic?
I think I'm satisfied with
You're
that.
satisfied? All right.
Thank you.
Well, then let's talk about the traffic study and what we think and what we think the best way forward is, if there is a way forward.
If there is a way forward, I mean, of course, if the applicant accepts it, but just going back to that whole point of what it could be, is I think it would be prudent for us to try to talk through some type of condition as it pertains to if it was to change within the AM piece. Because again, we talk about what it is or what the proposal is to what it could be. A McDonald's versus a Saki is very different when you're serving, I guess, at all hours in the mornings, lunch, and afternoon versus your lunchtime to your afternoon and closing at like 9:30, 10 p.m. when they close, right? So again, something for, if this was to move forward, to make me comfortable, it might be good to put that type of condition in there.
Tim, I'm sorry, I did have one more question for the traffic engineer. That
Sure.
He was referred to speak with him about or direct to him.
Mr. Cook?
Sorry.
Yes, as I said, you're never truly done. So we have an additional follow-up for you.
So as we had asked staff a moment ago, and they had referred us to you to speak with about the possibility, if we were going to continue to permit left turns from 6th Street on to Wilkinson Boulevard, do you think there would be support, in your opinion, as well as from NCDOT, to allow for a caution light there, whether it's for part of the day or particularly in the PM hours, just to increase visibility there for those left turns across the 6 lanes of traffic?
Sure. In my experience, I have not seen a caution light installed at an intersection where the control wasn't changing. So, for example, they're popular where you're converting a two-way stop to an all-way stop. And, quote another manual that we look at, so it's the Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse. It compiles all sorts of safety mitigations and perceived benefit of those. Caution light is not in those. I was looking that up while you guys were looking at discussing it, so there's not a proven documented safety benefit of a caution light. And it will be up to NCDOT. So I would say, that's, it never hurts to ask NCDOT. I'm not sure where they would stand on it in this specific location, but I know there's no proven safety measure to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe it would be wise to see whether the applicant is amenable to certain conditions at this point, and then we can continue our deliberations. So if somebody representing the applicant can come, and again, let's talk about proposed conditions. This is not an opportunity to replow ground that the hearing is closed, but of the 2 additional conditions that were discussed, one is the addition of a second egress lane at the site access, resulting in 1 ingress and 2 egress lanes. Are you all amenable to that?
We are, that was actually in our original plan that we submitted. Do you have, she can pull up, I had my knowing this was potentially coming, I thought y'all might want to see, I had my civil engineer this morning go ahead and put that lane in.
All right.
And I thought y'all may want to see it. We believed from the beginning it made a lot of sense.
Okay.
So if you can remember in your head, there was 1 in, 1 out. What this shows is 2 in, 1 out. The thinking is, if you look at the way it was designed by the engineer, if you take the far right in, you can't go straight. You can only go right into the drive-through lane. The one in the middle takes you straight into the 24 parking spaces that are available. In our opinion, what this does is it allows someone to say, I'm going to drive-through, or tonight I'm going to go in and sit down, or the drive-through's a little busy, I might go ahead and just park and go in and get it to go, or sit down and eat it. And then the 1 lane out, we as the developer don't feel like that the congestion, our concerned congestion, if there ever is any, is in the parking lot, it's more out on the street.
Okay, yes. So to summarize, the answer is yes, you're amenable to
Yes.
that condition. All right, thank you. Then regarding the mitigation at 6th and Wilkinson, so I've seen a couple iterations of that. One would be to put up a sign restricting left turns, saying no left turn during the 6:30 to 8:30 a.m. time period. And then staff has also proposed the following: any changes to the site's operating hours such that the use will become active during the AM peak period, 6:30 to 8:30 a.m., shall require an amendment to these conditions of approval. Are you amenable to either or both of those proposed conditions?
So when the city and I agreed on the scope of the study, we could have studied fast casual, which is what Saki is, but we chose to study fast food with a drive-through, which is a more intense use. And I did that because I wanted, Saki may go out of business 10 years from now, and I wanted to make sure that we did today what we needed to do for anybody. So that's why we did that. So the recommendations you're seeing for mitigation are for fast food,
Yes.
not for fast casual. And so if there's really, this is important because there's 2 paths to take. One path is if Saki opens and it's fast casual and they're not open in the morning, and that's the suggested no left turn time frame from 6:30 to 8:30, is there really any reason not to do anything with a left turn? If I was a neighbor, or to y'all's point about having a choice between going out and taking a left on Wilkinson and going down versus cutting through town and getting caught up in that, I would take the Wilkinson.
So again, returning to the conditions.
Hey, Rob, can I just add one point? So I understand kind of the hedging on both sides, right? So let's say Saki's not in business in 10 years, right? It changes use. But in 10 years, that whole area could change significantly, and it would be a different view for whatever council is in place at that time.
That's right.
To review the traffic. So it's almost a double-edged sword where it could also come back to hit the council if the council today doesn't put that condition in there to say.
And by extension, the city.
The city.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, the city does not put that condition in there to reevaluate that if, God forbid, that happens.
Mm-hmm. So with that, all right.
But again, I'm trying to point out that if we assume since they're not open for breakfast, and the mitigation is to have a no left from 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, is there really any need for that? I would say no. But to your point, if we come back to you at a later date and we didn't mitigate a no left from 6:30 to 8:30, we come back to you 5 years from now and say Dunkin' Donuts wants to go in here, then I would argue that yes, I need to come back in here and we need to get the traffic engineer back engaged again and find out what mitigation needs to be done today. So I'm willing to come back, but what I'm saying is you can't double dip, or it doesn't seem fair to double dip. Don't ask me to mitigate for something that doesn't exist and come back to you and also.
So fair enough. So if we forego the sign, any of that mitigation, but we simply say any changes to the site's operating hours such that the use will become active during the AM peak period shall require an amendment to these conditions of approval. Isn't that saying the same thing that you just said?
Yes, and I would
Then
agree
you-
with that.
All right, thank you.
As
Any other?
opposed to mitigating.
Right, all right,
something
yeah,
that
yeah,
exists.
okay,
So,
all right, that's fair, that's
Or I
fair.
can mitigate today based on their recommendations.
Yeah.
And then take that out. So I'm happy to go either way is what I'm telling you.
Okay, but not both, is what you're saying?
Right.
Okay, got it, okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you. All right, well, so I think we've got that squared away. The applicant is amenable. Should we put such a condition in that if the use changes or the operating hours change such that the AM peak hour will be activated, then the conditions will need to be amended and we can discuss that further, or whoever is around can discuss that further at that time. All right. Well then, let's proceed. Then what do we think? It's coming time to make a decision.
I personally go back to what could it be? That's why the whole purpose with putting the condition in allows the council at a future date to determine what's right for that particular area. Putting a McDonald's in that particular area or a high-density compartmentalized type of building in that particular intersection may not be the right use, but is a restaurant where you have lunch and PM, the only operating actions better than what the alternative could be, is the way I look at it. I think there's another piece too here. I mean, again, like I mentioned, they clearly don't want the storage units there anymore, so it's going to change use, whether it comes before us as it is tonight, or it doesn't go before us, and then it's something with a higher density. That's just what I'm trying to view it from this perspective. And then the final piece, not that this is the reason why we would vote on it, but we did hire retail strategies. We did spend a lot of money to try to engage businesses to come into our Wilkinson Boulevard. And we've all individually said at the retreat and other council meetings how important it is to bring in good businesses. This is a family-owned, locally family-owned business coming to the area. And I'm not saying that's why we should vote yes to it, but it's not a McDonald's. It's not a Starbucks on this corner or a high-traffic area. It's a Saki Express. Like, we know what we're getting ourselves into with this. I'm just saying the alternative could be potentially worse. That's the way I look at it.
Other thoughts?
So, so let me try to think how I want to start this. Been in Belmont a long time. Saki is a fantastic establishment. It's run by a great family. They do a lot for Belmont, all the platitudes. I do not think this is a good site for this, because I know you're talking about the what ifs. It could also be, I keep coming back to the safety perspective of it. I really do not think this is safe. I think we are gonna have, it doesn't pass the eye test. I mean, we all drive down Wilkinson every single day. I have for 30-something years. You're going down Wilkinson in the afternoon, coming back home into Belmont. There's a ton of traffic. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. I feel like we all forget how popular Saki was. There was always a line in the afternoon, wrapped around the building, spilling out of the parking lot. It's gonna happen again, and I think that this site is gonna cause, I disagree with it being labeled as fast food and not fast casual, because it's made to order. The orders aren't gonna be processed as fast as fast food. So they're not gonna have as many customers, but those customers are gonna be sitting longer in that queue. So that queue is gonna stack up into 74. I don't care what anybody says, it's gonna stack up into Wilkinson. If you guys wanna vote for it, go for it, but I can't have that on my conscience if somebody gets a little extra. It's gonna happen. I can't, I mean,
So I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but let me ask you this. Would you be okay if the current property owner there were to, let's suppose that they did combine the parcels and they wanted to do, by right, a multifamily apartment complex there?
I mean,
That
it's
would
not
not come
right.
to, that would not come to council.
That's on their conscience, man. You know what I'm saying? I understand. I'm for Saki. I would love to see Saki go to Alex's point. the whole purpose of what we talked about at the retreat was to build up Wilkinson. We've all seen that part of Wilkinson. It needs some revival. I just think Saki should be on the other side of Wilkinson because they are a PM business. It should capture the traffic coming home from Charlotte.
I agree, that would be ideal,
Yeah,
but
I just don't.
unfortunately, you know, the applicant is, they own the property on the eastbound side, but. I think it's-
So, all right, any further thoughts? All right, Jason?
I think there's been a number of excellent points raised tonight and analysis by staff, and we really appreciate your contributions to all of this. I'm kind of torn to Alex's point about the alternative, because we've seen that, plenty of instances in Belmont, when developments that this council and perhaps others before us would likely not have approved, and we're paying the price in some of those instances now, but council never got the opportunity to impose conditions or deny. And so when you consider, you know, what could go there, along with, again, we've invested a lot in trying to redevelop this eyesore as you come into Belmont, and, you know, perhaps this, if it were to be approved, could be, you know, a shot in the arm, you know, to help spur that development for the types of businesses that we want. It's not lost on me the traffic and the safety concerns. I mean, I live in a neighborhood with a lot of small children, and I know we've actually requested speed studies, and the speed studies in our neighborhood didn't justify speed calming measures, to our surprise, because we see speeders. There's not a lot of them, but when they speed, sometimes it can be severe speeding. And that's why I asked the question about, irrespective of the speed study results, could we arbitrarily, you know, implement additional, whether it's another speed hump, you know, or some other, you know, I think the high visibility crosswalk on for the Greenway is going to add a lot, you know, in itself of calming, hopefully, to that stretch of 6th Street. But that's just my thoughts, Jim.
Yeah, Catherine?
I have a thought of what you said, Alex, with, I think my mic's not working. I'm not
Sounds
gonna give a
like
vote for that, this is my last one. Let me turn this sucker on.
There you go.
We're in.
Yeah.
I think that, you're right, I'm worried about what by right could do for that piece of land. I, of course, do not want to see an adult store, on the corner of that property, especially for a neighborhood that has small children. Is there gonna be through traffic consistently through 6th Street? Yes. It stinks. The nicest way to put it, it stinks. It sucks, really. Like, the only thought process to me would be gate that community and make people figure out how to get to the spot. Because there's always gonna be people cutting through 6th Street. The problem that they have as the citizens there is the speed, because people don't abide by the law. We know this. I lay on the horn at school traffic every single day. I put my car in park and I lay on the horn because people blow through those pedestrians. It makes me so upset. So people don't abide by the law, but we can't control what people don't abide by, right? So my thought is, I would rather have a Saki there than an adult store. I would rather have a Saki there versus an apartment complex. We don't need any more people piling in. Do I want anything there at all? No. I wish we could keep Belmont quaint. I wish that we could turn it back 15 years from what we have right now and go back to the way we used to be. Yes, that's what I wish we could do. But we can't stop these businesses from applying and wanting to be in these certain areas just because we want it to be what it used to be, because it's just not possible. So that's where I'm at. I would rather Saki be there than the alternative, but I also have the guilty conscience of the danger that comes with that. But what danger is going to come with the future of that, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that if it were, you know, if everyone knew, it would be an easy decision.
Correct.
We don't. I guess I approach things slightly different. You know, I look at where we were in September. The applicant asked for relief from the traffic study. We looked at the numbers and the data provided by planning staff, and we said that the numbers and the data supported requiring a traffic study. So we continued the matter until today in order to have them conduct that traffic study and see what it says. And so now we have that traffic study, and we have data points, and we have information. So what does that reveal to us? And what I look for is, you know, the concern, it seems the overwhelming concern is the cut-through traffic down 6th Street. So I look and you know, what is the effect of this development on 6th Street? Because again, when we're talking about TTMs, we're talking about traffic studies, as Catherine said, yeah, things suck, but they're not responsible for
I
the...
said stinks.
Oh, all right, it stinks. Well, they're not, you know, they're not responsible for the stinctitude. They, you know, they only have to clean up their own mess, if you will. So what are they actually adding to the background that's already there? And so that's why I ask questions about trip distribution, pass-by trips, and, you know, what are they actually adding down 6th Street? We have data for AM and PM. I think the AM is not relevant at this point because, you know, they're not going to operate during the AM peak hours. So let's look at the PM peak hours. So, you know, they say, according to Bolton and Meek, our traffic engineer, 80% is going to go left out of the site, 20% right down 6th Street. Now, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think we were all skeptical of that to some degree. So there's going to be more than 20% exiting the site going down 6th Street. But the question is, well, as Jason brought up, while the percentages might be greater, what are the actual numbers? And that's where it's a bit murky. We have the data provided for a fast food with drive-through in the TTM, but it's acknowledged that this is not a fast food with drive-through. This is fast casual. So that this is a worst-case scenario, but this actual applicant is probably going to have less trips generated. They're certainly going to have less during the AM because they're not even going to be open for most of those hours until 10:30 or 11. So there's going to be probably significantly less trips generated than the numbers that are set forth in the study. But the question then is how much and what effect does that have? And that, of course, is where it requires I think a judgment call because we don't really know. But I think it's fair to say, and you know, the percentages turning right out of Saki and going down 6th Street will be higher. In terms of the raw numbers, though, what number of trips is it actually adding, say, during PM peak hours or whatnot? And that, I don't know whether that's going to be significant or not. That's sort of where I am.
That's what frustrates me when we ask for these TTMs or TIAs. It's like we use our common sense when we're trying to decide, but then the applicant has to pay for these TTMs, but they come back and they're not, they may be accurate, but living here 39 years, we know how this is going to go by common sense. And so I get frustrated with that a little bit. That's where we're there. It's just my 2 cents on TTMs, TIAs.
So how about this, though? Is there any, we've talked about the 2 additional conditions that staff recommended and that the applicant's amenable to the 2 egress lanes and to revisiting the conditions should the use ever change to invoke the AM operating hours. Are there any other conditions anyone would consider imposing that might make you more comfortable with this?
Jim, can you just restate, I know the 2 ingress lanes is the way it's being proposed now, modified.
I thought it was egress.
It's ingress.
Ingress. So that you can have traffic going to the drive-through as well as to the parking lot.
2 coming in.
Ingress.
Okay, as it's proposed now?
That was the condition.
That was one of the conditions.
That they agreed to. 2 coming in, 1.
Because that was the original, correct, that was the original idea of
Oh,
the
yeah, 2 ingress. 1 going to the left and then 1 straight into the parking lot. And then out.
think there was consensus on that, because that way you allow the drive-through traffic as well as the dine-in traffic to not be sort of jacked up, all.
It was the one that's being pulled up from the.
Yeah, can you put that back up? Okay. All right, yeah, all right.
Did you understand that, everyone, John?
I thought I understood it as egress, but, let me look at the conditions. But I mean, the diagram shows what it shows, so I'm fine with that. Let's see. Second, see it on the, all right, on what staff has provided, it says second egress lane at the site access resulting in one ingress and two egress lanes.
So that's incorrect.
Well, what is it?
I believe
What's the correct?
Is it two ingress and one egress, or two egress and one ingress? I know I got it somewhere.
So the staff report is based on the traffic study that was completed by Bolton and Mink, which proposes two egress and one ingress. Aaron spoke earlier, there are benefits to both two ingress and one egress and two egress and one ingress, but the traffic engineer is recommending a 3-lane cross-section at the site access either way. The traffic study recommended two egress or two exit, which for our members of the public or for folks who aren't as familiar, ingress is just entry lanes and egress is exit lanes leaving the site. The study recommends two egress lanes because there was concern that if there are queues on 6th Street that are backing up past the site access, folks that are turning left onto 6th Street who are waiting for that queue to clear will block up the rest of the traffic on the site, and folks turning right won't be able to get out. So the two egress lanes was recommended to mitigate that. However, as Aaron described earlier, there are also benefits from a queuing perspective to the two ingress lanes, where you're now allowing folks to move around the drive-through if they're in the rightmost lane, or go straight to the parking if they're in the
Charlie, to
leftmost
your
entry
point, if
lane.
that was the case and you only had one ingress lane,
Yeah.
you're much more likely to have backups all the way on the 74.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I think ideally you should have 4.
Well, ideally, yeah, I just don't think the site allows for that, but.
Okay, well, so is that then the consensus of council that it would be to ingress? To the extent the applicant was of a different, is two, I
That was
mean.
his original plan anyway.
Okay, all right, well, we cleared up that confusion, so it would be two ingress and one egress, and I understand what you're saying, why we wanna try and avoid the queues, yeah.
So while we're at it, can we also confirm where we are with the left turn movement on the second floor? With restrictions or without completely?
This is my understanding, is that because the restrictions, the impetus for the restrictions were caused by AM traffic concerns, that since the applicant is not going to be open during AM, that we would not need that restriction at the moment. But if the use ever changed or the operating hours ever changed, we were going to put in the condition that they would have to come back and amend the conditions, and we could implement the mitigation at that time.
I disagree with that. We gotta have a no left turn out of there at all times. You're gonna get so much traffic.
I think it's meaningless in the mornings.
It is, it's the,
But-
yeah.
No, I mean, to have a restriction in the morning.
Yeah,
I
you're
personally
right,
think it's
you're right.
meaningless. In the afternoon, I can see it. But the downside of that is if you restrict movements, think about it, if you restrict left turn movements in the PM, that just means more traffic on 6th Street.
Yeah. And it's gonna be harder for people to get out of the neighborhood, like not people that are necessarily visiting Saki, but
Right.
people who live in the neighborhood. want to-
Right.
That's already gonna happen no matter what we do.
Yeah. So I think that, to me, that's a bigger concern.
The PM.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, if there's things that we can install working with DOT to increase, the visibility of folks potentially making that left turn onto
Mhm.
Wilkinson, I think that's something we need to explore, but I think the downside of imposing restrictions, even in the PM hour, is just gonna force more traffic onto Sixth Street.
All right, so what's where are we at then?
So I mean. yeah.
Well, I mean, on that particular issue,
Yeah, on that issue, I mean, personally, I would be opposed to, I'll hold my nose and say no restrictions on left turns on the Wilkinson.
Which is what would happen if we go the conditional route.
Mhm.
If it changes use for the AM, then that will give the council, the city at that time to determine, because again, what my concern is if this was to get approved, and I know I've already stated it, but as it stands today, if it was to get approved without this condition, the McDonald's would go in, right? I mean, the
Mhm.
change of use, and then you're seeing way more cars.
What's
With
that
a coffee
point?
shop,
Yeah.
you know, and you've got people just constantly going
Right.
through this.
But to that point, I think that should apply all day, not just for the AM peak hours, because depending on the use, it could also further increase the
Mhm.
PM trip count. So I think if you're gonna impose that condition, it should be
Mhm.
for the entire day.
But as I understood it, we were not going to impose that condition at this time, only, I understand what you're saying, but, I mean, we need, we need to resolve that before, we need to understand what we're going to vote on, should a motion arise at some point in the near future.
So just to summarize, Saki will go there and there will be no traffic improvements done outside of that parking lot.
Because the only mitigation recommended
Was just
was,
that sign that says, "Don't take a left."
which was a result of,
That's something.
yes, which was a result of AM peak hour concerns that would not be, well, that's the rationale.
And that recommendation is based on a fast food definition,
Mhm.
not fast casual,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So it's a lower bar.
My main concern is the left turn from Wilkinson onto Six. I feel like we gotta do something with that. I don't know what.
From Charlotte to
Yes,
Sixth
yeah,
Street.
if you're going west on Wilkinson, making that left turn on Six, I feel like that's where we got it.
Because you're worried about a queue from the restaurant.
Yeah, and
If
somebody's gonna get stuck
Yeah.
out with their tail end of their car hanging out or something like that. It's gonna be ugly. That's my major concern.
Well, I see there's some discussion, I get that concern, is there anything that can be done, planning, traffic consultant, regarding that concern?
If you're talking about,
Oh, well.
sure,
I
I'm
see
happy
what
to turn it over, I just wanna make
Yeah.
sure that we're understanding your request. So if we're talking about if there's things that can restrict left turn movements off of Wilkinson onto Sixth Street, and I have Reagan to speak to this as well.
Yes.
My understanding is that would need to be a conversation with NCDOT,
Mhm.
which we could commit to as a planning department, facilitating that question to see what that future would look like. But since Wilkinson itself is a state roadway, we wouldn't want to speak to what the possibilities to that would be without consultation.
Mhm. Okay. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
I do just want to offer the chance for the traffic engineer to clarify too. They've made me aware that the left turn restriction as studied in the TTM does include a left turn restriction during the PM peak as well.
All right.
So in the study, it's not only
Right.
an AM peak, it's.
It was
the whole
staff
day.
that changed it.
It was
based-
staff that, that advised council, the delay that's required, the delay that's being experienced that requires mitigation based on our code is occurring only during the AM peak. But right, for the sake of clarity, the TTM looks at a full left turn restriction at all times, off of Sixth.
Okay, hold on, just so I understand. So Saki is not open in the morning, but we are saying that the AM needs to be mitigated, but not the PM when there's.
That's what I was raising.
That's why I said I feel
The
like
traffic
it's-
consultant is telling us that we need AM and peak. Is that correct, just in layman's terms here?
Whether we need it or not, I will defer to the traffic engineer.
Because
to
now it's
speak to.
sounding like no AM, and then you put the peak in, put the condition in, because it would have been in there regardless, and then we can move forward from that perspective, but.
Yeah, just to clarify, I apologize for just jumping out, I want to keep per the land development code, the delay, assuming the fast food restaurant for the northbound left in the AM is much higher, but per the land development code, the mitigation is required for PM peak as well, with the increase in delay for that northbound line.
So where does that leave us, Jim?
Well, propose a condition, and then we'll see if the applicant is amenable to it.
Continue with the condition if it changes the use with the AM time, but maintaining the PM restrictions on left turn. Is essentially, I guess, what it would come down to. Charlie, does that? Because then you're restricting it in the PM when it's actually operating. AM, it won't be operating.
But he's talking about left turns from Wilkinson on to 6, you're talking about left turns, I believe.
Yeah, from 6
Wilkinson.
on to Wilkinson.
Thanks.
But even
what-
that too, I want to hear what you're saying.
But what I'm saying is to Charlie's point, where there's no traffic mitigation, that would be mitigation for its time in operation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, Rob, would that be?
I'm not sure I completely,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I completely follow the bouncing ball. I mean, we were talking about a no left going to Wilkinson from Sixth Street in the morning, which was the identified potential problem zone.
Hang on, no left from Wilkinson.
From Sixth Street,
6th Street on the Wilkinson.
so if I'm coming from Adams Bluff to the stop sign, I can't take a left from 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning.
But why in the morning? That confuses me. Just explain, I'm sorry, I just want to know. I'm confused
I heard
on
Charles
that.
traffic engineer, so he can tell you,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing the traffic over in Charlotte.
I think it has to do with queues developing down 6th Street, but
Correct. And to be clear, the traffic study says both peak hours. Sorry for that
yes.
mistranslation between
Mhm.
the staff report as well.
All right, so let's clear this up. Let's
I just want to make sure this
Their,
is understood.
right, their study, the Bolton and Mink study said mitigation is needed at this intersection. It should be a left over, which would restrict left turns, as I understand it. That was their recommendation. Planning staff, based on that recommendation, said, well, in light of the fact that more of the concern is generated from the AM peak hours, and it might not be feasible, it might not be, there are some other concerns in doing the true leftover improvements. Their alternative was to either require the sign restricting it in the AM, or to have just the condition that they come back should the operating hours ever change. But it seems to me as if, if we were so inclined, we could say, well, no, we want to follow the recommendation in the Bolton and Mink report. That is what our condition should be. We disagree with the planning staff's alternative recommendation. We want the recommendation that's in the traffic study. So that is an option.
Geez.
Well, I mean, that's what we're here for. We've got to make the tough decisions, so what do we think about that? Would we rather have the recommendation of the traffic study versus planning staff's alternative recommendation after all, or what do we want?
I'm not in favor of having particularly a PM left turn restriction. Because I think that creates even more problems for 6th Street.
I agree, they're gonna just go right and loop around.
I don't disagree with
So
that.
either it's, to
So I
Alex's
think
point,
it just leaves it, the condition would be, correct me if I'm wrong, if it changes use in the AM times, then it needs to be revisited by the city. No restriction as it relates to the turning off that road. And to Charlie's point, if we could add in there a suggestion that staff, or ask staff to get with NCDOT on looking at the left turn off Wilkinson into 6th Street, and see if the sign can be designated to no left turn off Wilkinson to 6th.
I think that's gonna create more problems.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
so I'll make a motion.
All right. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve with the condition that if the use changes, that to if the use changes to permit AM operations, right, that may not be exactly the verbiage to use, but AM operations, then it would have, how do I rephrase that, it would have to come to council for review?
It would require an amendment of the conditions of approval.
It would require an amendment for the conditions.
Okay. And would you also be moving that another additional condition be the 2 ingress lanes and 1 egress lane?
That's correct, so moved.
Okay. Motion by Jason, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Alex. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 3-2. So I would then need, I would also need a motion that the petition is a reasonable request and in the public interest and is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan in land use and environment.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Alex. Seconded by Jason. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 3-2. All right, thank you. Anything?
Just for the record, it's been from a dilapidated storage unit to a fantastic restaurant. We added nothing outside of that.
In Charlie, we could have added absolutely less of higher density and higher traffic count.
Exactly.
But that's not what we're talking about.
But we wouldn't have the option, we can talk about it.
But that's not what's in front of us. I just want to make that clear.
No. All right. Why don't we take a brief recess? We'll take a 5-minute recess and come back with the next agenda item. On the agenda is public hearing for TA 2023-01, Housing Choices Text Amendment. I'll entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Motion by Alex, second by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are in public hearing, and I will recognize our planning director, Tiffany Farrow, to present on behalf of staff.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. I am excited to share with you what has been a 3-year-long discussion as a formal item for your consideration this evening, and that is public hearing TA 2023.01 for consideration of a text amendment to incorporate additional housing choices into the Land Development Code. So, brief highlights. The purpose of this ongoing conversation is for us to find some alternatives to apartment building forms, expand housing choices here within the city, and ultimately advocate for continued design standards wherever possible within our housing form options. Currently in Belmont, we have 3 main housing options that folks can consider. One is a detached house, and we're most often familiar with this. Another is a townhouse, and because we're a form-based code, townhouses can be utilized both in single-family design options as well as multifamily design options. And then when it comes to multifamily, right now our code is currently very limited and really has the only other option being an apartment building form. So when I say that, it's not to say that these apartment buildings can't also have shop fronts on the ground level, but largely what we're seeing is what you see on the bottom right on the screen, right? Something that's typically 3 or more stories in size, 20 to 30 units in each building, oftentimes with multiple buildings on a proposed development site. And typically these buildings also have pretty significant building footprints in terms of lot coverage. So those are the 3 that we have today. What we are asking for your consideration of this evening is some alternative multifamily options that would provide for some additional considerations that might be more in line with the scale and character that we have here in Belmont. And the first option we wanted to introduce, and this is all based on community input and feedback, we had a housing choices conversation and study with Centralina, as you may recall, where we looked at forms that might be amenable to folks within the city. And then we also had an effort in partnership with our comprehensive land use plan update to identify where these forms might be amenable or best be located within our city limits. And so this is all based on the community input received. So the 2 forms I'm excited to introduce to you tonight. One is the cottage courts.
This took a lot of stickers, by the way.
This took a lot of stickers, and so thank you all for your continued support of that effort and really your support of reaching out to our community to get this feedback and how important that was to make sure that this was driven by the voices of not just staff but everyone within the community itself. So in this proposed option, what you're seeing is that the building forms proposed are largely the same as a detached house would be. They're more cottage style, and cottage courts would be comprised of between 5 and 12 small scale, what look like detached house structures around a central green courtyard. So you can see 2 examples on the screen, and you can see how one of the main differences is that the front door fronts onto that green space as opposed to fronting directly onto a street. But largely, these are most similar to the detached house form, just in a different site layout. The other option we are asking for your consideration of this evening is something called a courtyard building. This is also centered around a central courtyard. The difference here is that instead of detached structures, this would be attached. Unlike an apartment building, these units would not be accessed off of a central hallway inside, but instead all of those doors have to be accessed off of that central courtyard space so that everybody still faces each other when they're coming into those units. So again, very similar in concept, and then as you can see there, the parking in both of these cases would be in the rear, and also an allowable option for garage. So those are the 2 there. So again, these are the 2 that we saw community support for, And so then the next question becomes, where should they be located? So in looking at the land development code, there are zoning districts that already allow for multifamily, and so we are proposing to introduce these forms everywhere where multifamily is already allowed. Again, as a reminder, multifamily already must comply with additional regulations for that use within Chapter 6. But in the following zones, multifamily is already allowed, and we are proposing introduction of these forms in those areas as well. That includes neighborhood center residential, neighborhood center commercial, downtown development, infill development, and traditional neighborhood development. And then there's two distinctions here, and this was based on feedback within the comprehensive land use plan update. That is that cottage courts are proposed within suburban residential, and so when you think of this as largely maybe more wide open sites that have a little bit more spread to create these cottage courts. And those are proposed within suburban residential subject to a special use permit only. So this is not proposed to be allowable everywhere that wants to be suburban residential. It would come before you for that special use permit process to allow each proposed development site that might be a good fit for this to be considered on a site-specific basis. And as a reminder, considered in light of the special use findings of visual and functional compatibility, making sure that it doesn't have a negative impact on surrounding property values, as well as considerations of public safety.
Just real quick on that.
Mhm.
Since this is not currently allowed in our code, and we're adding this, is there a reason why we're going down the SUP route instead of trying to just force this conditional?
That's correct. So it can still go conditional. As a reminder, for infill opportunities, there are size restrictions and minimum standard sizes for them. So for infill sites, conditional zoning is currently not an option within general residential or suburban residential. That being said, if there's a larger piece of property, conditional zoning would still be opened up as an option, and our land development code does allow someone to pursue conditional zoning instead of an SUP if their site is large enough to be able to petition for that. So this would allow for flexibility of both in that case.
What's the trigger for that conditional zoning in that example you gave? What's the trigger that would cause it to go conditional?
Sure, so just like any other, so like a detached house wouldn't go conditional, right? But an accumulation of detached houses would trigger a condition. It's the same threshold. If it requires a TIA, right, then it would go conditional in any of the typical standards. If the building square footage is over a certain size. But the big thing here is that even in a courtyard building, even though it's all attached, it is limited to that 12-unit max. So it will not have a building footprint that is like an apartment building, and the height's also capped at 2 stories, unlike apartments, which can be significantly larger. Of note, the detached houses in our code are allowed 2.5 stories. So the cap here on both of these is actually less than what's allowed for a detached house building form.
So in addition, I guess I was really more getting at dwelling units, right?
Yep.
In addition to the other stipulations or triggers you mentioned for conditional, if it's over, I hear you say 12 dwelling units, that's when it would trigger conditional?
No, so it's when it's over the need for a TIA. So again, on the peninsula, that's going to be 50 peak hour trips or 500 daily, or if there's an accumulation of a development that is 100 peak hour trips or 1,000 daily. That being said, in our code, depending on the zone, there are different anchorages. Even if somebody doesn't have to go conditional, they could still petition to go conditional or ask for that. And so as long as the lot size allowed for that as an option, somebody could consider going conditional instead of requesting an SUP if they met that lot size minimum. And so keep in mind that the other thing that the SUP does ensure is that you cannot offer relief through an SUP. That means that anybody who wants to do any one of these building forms would have to comply with every single regulation that's been outlined in the code as part of your proposed text amendment to even be able to come before you. So,
just one note though on the SUP with this. Generally we talk about conditional zoning because it gives the authority, the legislation to council, but on these 2 unique cottage courts and courtyard building, they're not existent in our community for the most part, right? So if you were to put this in a particular area, I believe one of it says that it has to be compliant or similar to its existing surroundings. So immediately this is going to start discounting this. If I'm just looking at this.
So that would be be up to council's discretion to determine that, but certainly it would be the applicant's burden to prove it. When we think about that as planning staff, what we're primarily thinking about is the scale, right? Is it on a large corner lot? Also, what are the architectural materials? Keeping in mind that 160D has now limited our ability to regulate building design elements for anything 4 units or less. So the state says we cannot enforce building design elements for anything that has 4 units or less. So therefore, we have lost our aesthetic control if we don't start considering other options. And so that is one thing that staff is trying to keep in mind with introduction of this is if we want to regulate things like consistency with like a neighborhood that might be all brick, and this is on the corner. Right now, we don't have any way to force that, but through the special use permit process, in order to find that visually or functionally compatible, that could be an architectural element that is necessary as a condition in order for you to make such a finding. It is not something that I can administratively guide or offer, and so there's a protection in that you can negotiate slightly on that front through that process.
Or through conditional zoning, the legislative body.
Correct. You could do conditional zoning if there was a lot big enough, keeping in mind that one of the recommendations within the comprehensive land use plan was to really capitalize instead of looking at more infrastructure build, longer roads, longer utility lines, everything like that. Are there opportunities to take advantage of infill and existing infrastructure, whether that, even if it does need some upgrades, right, that would still be on the developer to do those things and make sure that we have the infrastructure to support it. But instead of building more mileage of roads, more linear feet of utilities and extending that out away from the core, trying to find opportunities for infill development to really capitalize on the infrastructure we already have today and create areas that are more walkable and sustainable. And so through the proposal, we're suggesting a special use permit process because we fully understand as staff that does not make every site a good fit for one of these building forms. It doesn't make every neighborhood a good fit for one of these building forms. But the way that we have zoning designations right now, they are pretty broad sweeping. And so in order to make sure that there was still a level of discretion without doing an all-out, these forms are allowable everywhere in the zoning district, we wanted to make sure that there was still some level of discretion offered and proposed, and that there was a process outlined that felt fair to everyone involved, that they would be given a chance to have notice, that they would be given a chance to have a hearing before this body, and ultimately that nothing gets approved until there is a consensus among city council that a proposed development is a good fit for a specific site, given all the variables, and it would only come before you if it met all of the regulations that are drafted in the proposed text amendment. So staff would do a first vetting, you all would do a second vetting and final approval of that. And again, without any relief, because if they wanted relief, it would automatically trigger the necessity of going conditional zoning. And so we tried to make the regulations in your proposed text as stringent as possible so that if anybody does need relief, to Alex's point, conditional zoning would be the preferred option, but also wanted to make sure we were mindful of the fact that a lot of these proposed sites could be infill and might not meet the minimum land thresholds for being able to require conditional zoning or even allow it to proceed that way. So again, on this chart, big differences is suburban residential is what was envisioned based on community input for cottage courts. And then courtyard building would be in general residential. Again, not every site's going to be a good fit. Not every site's even going to be eligible. But of the ones that are identified as potentially being eligible, it would still come before you as a special use permit. So, yes?
So my question relates to the other zoning districts like neighborhood, neighborhood commercial residential?
Neighborhood center residential.
Neighborhood center residential, neighborhood center commercial, downtown district, infill, and traditional neighborhood, is that correct?
Yes.
So we would add those to those zoning districts. Would they also, once added, would they be subject to all the requirements outlined in Chapter 6?
Yes.
And so is that, I remember a text amendment regarding certain percentages have to be affordable, senior. Would they be subject to that requirement then?
They would not. That specific requirement is only for multifamily that's located within apartment building forms, and so they would not be subject to the age restriction requirement.
Or the other?
or the other, but they would be subject to the maximum unit size that's outlined by the building permit.
All right, thank you.
Remind me again of the maximum building size.
Sure, on both of these, it's a 5 to 12, so 5 units to 12 units.
That would trigger conditional zoning. and
No, that would just be what's limited within a proposed structure of these building types.
So where Jim's going to this point then, take the SUP out of it, NC
Yeah.
residential, et cetera, does that mean that these are gonna go by right, or are these gonna come through conditional zoning?
It depends. If it's one single property, it would be so let's say it's only 12 units, right? In one of these zones. It's an infill, 12 units, it's able to meet every other regulation in our code. There's no traffic study needed, then it would not come to you, unless it needs relief. But as we find a lot of times in especially our downtown areas or even some of the remaining sites that we have left, there are often easements that go through, other special considerations that might trigger it to go conditional.
Sure, but since these are brand new and we're calling this a form of a cottage court, cottage building, or excuse me, cottage courts and cottage court, or courtyard buildings, can we not make the essence of these forms conditional? Here's where I get very timid. It's just like this last text amendment that came before us that got denied. Is if we just open the gates, right now the state doesn't let us close them back. So the idea is, as much as I love the cottage courts idea, is there not an easier way to ease us into it that particular building form, like what we did with apartments a number of years ago, when since we're allowing it as something new to our building code to say only conditional?
So again, the only issue that potentially might arise with conditional is the lot size minimums. But I think it is absolutely possible if you all wanted to make sure that the decision, no matter where it's located, came before you to require either approval by special use permit or conditional zoning.
That's, would be my preference. Because again, once we open the gate, can't close it, so it needs to be done incrementally until the state passes legislation otherwise, in my mind. Or we just will relinquish our authority as a governing body.
I think that's perfectly fine. So what we can do is, if that is the direction and preference of City Council, is that can be added as an additional condition in Chapter 6 that multifamily already needs to comply with. And there were no changes proposed as drafted to Chapter 6, but we can certainly add one into the multifamily housing options that would require multifamily in these forms, not necessarily to have the age restriction, but to be approved through special use permit or conditional zoning.
Yep, thank you.
So that can be added, we don't have to go back to the drawing board, we can just, depending on where the discussion ultimately leads, it would be approved as modified with that modification, is that correct?
That would be my proposal.
Okay.
Does that check your box, Jim?
Well, I just want to make sure that you know, it's just, impacts the outcome here, whether we can move forward or.
Agreed, I see what you're saying, I see what you're saying.
Because like, remember last time, we didn't think.
Completely changed.
Yes.
I got you.
And so we had to go reject what was presented, go back, Wesley, to the drawing board, but it sounds like what Tiffany's saying, this would be as simple as, there's a path forward, make a tweak, and so if we're all right with everything else, once she finishes her presentation, we could ostensibly approve as modified and resolve it today.
Okay, cool.
So,
Government at work.
yes. You may.
She's saying conditional or SUP. You're saying conditional and if not allowed, then SUP.
Correct.
I guess I'm trying to understand it. Conditional, but if not allowed, that's.
If not, you said it had to be a minimal lot size, so if it didn't qualify, conditional only, unless it doesn't qualify, then SUP. But you're saying when you put SUP and conditional or, then.
Okay, so we're saying if it's under the minimum, I just want to make sure, because I'll draft out some
He wants
language.
conditional always, unless you can't.
Unless you can't do it. So, okay, that's fine. So what we can do is in that language, when we draft it out, and I'll go write some language to make sure it's good, is we can say,
I'm glad we'll be good.
that it's SUP if it falls under the minimum thresholds as identified in, and we'll reference that chapter that sets those thresholds. If it's that or above, it is required to go conditional.
Agreed, but I just want to make sure I understand. Again, I'm not trying to keep going on to this point, but are we not, and sometimes I oversimplify zoning, but can we not just say, anywhere in our zoning, cottage court goes conditional, and it's up to the applicant if they would like to go SUP versus.
Well, no, the problem is that,
I know we have the threshold such as,
yeah,
is the lot size, is such as the restrictions we put on the age when it came to the apartment complex for the senior and affordable housing piece.
it's more the lot size.
It's more the lot size.
So it's the most restrictive guideline in your code is what guides. So that's the challenge, is because that one would be the more restrictive with the lot size, it would guide and prohibit anybody from petitioning anything in infill to come before you. But
That makes sense. So just so I 100% understand, it will always default to conditional unless the applicant decides to go to SUP, unless the lot size is smaller than what is defined underneath requirements for conditional zoning. And then it will go to SUP, correct?
yeah, that's
Okay, we're on the same page. We're good, we're good. I just
No.
wanna make sure.
It's good. It's important to understand what we're voting on. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Which means that the projects that are on larger lots would be forced to come conditional zoning.
Yes, that's right.
And things that are infill and under that threshold
We'll go
would come
SUP.
SUP.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Because that leaves, even though SUPs are not legislative, it allows the council, the governing body to have the final say on that. I'm good with that.
All right, so that's that slide. And then the next one.
Did you cover everything just on one slide?
Well, I mean, there's 6 total, so you can choose which one that you think covered it best. But my last one for you this evening is just a recap of staff and planning board review. Again, I feel like as a community, we've had this conversation going on for several years, so we tried to keep it as staff pretty tight here today. And as in summary, staff and planning board believe this text amendment as presented and as proposed for modification is reasonable and in the public interest, and that it aligns with the comp plan, the new update for clarification in the areas of land use, housing, and community character. We did present the text amendment to planning board at their November 5th meeting. I will note that they had some very constructive and helpful feedback to help us further refine this, and that was great to hear. So we incorporated that into the text that you have before you in your packet. Additionally, as a part of that analysis, planning board asked us to go back and just double check with a few of our departments, of which we've now done and coordinated with them as well. So the proposed text before you this evening also includes coordinated feedback related to stormwater, fire department feedback for access and ensured public safety, as well as utility connections of what would be needed for these new housing forms. So all of that's included in the text before you this evening. And again, has received unanimous recommendation for your approval by the Planning and Zoning Board. So with that, that's all staff has for you. I stand by for any questions that you may have, but other than that, looking forward to this discussion.
Any additional questions?
Thank you all for working
Yeah,
on
I
this.
just want to thank you and staff for this. This has been, I know you've been working on this for quite some time, and we know that affordability is an issue in Belmont. Hopefully this is a step in the right direction towards that, and I like the products that you've identified. I know there's a lot of community input involved with that, so we appreciate all of your time and efforts with that.
Oh, absolutely.
My only question, I think in sections 5.3 and 5.4 as amended, you changed permitted uses and you took out a lot of stuff and you changed it to restricted uses. Can you just sort of
Sure,
walk
I
us
sure
through the
can.
rationale?
Yes, so when we looked at those sections, when we're looking at the list, what you actually have in the land development code today is in fact not lists of uses, but lists of types of housing. And so it says permitted uses, but really it's listing things like duplexes and detached housing, and those are housing types, those are housing forms, those are not housing uses. So we just thought instead of just having a laundry list of housing types under something called permitted uses, it made it cleaner and easier for everyone to understand that what's restricted in single-family residential, primarily single-family residential zones, is multifamily. And the only exception to that is if there is consideration of one of these housing forms that's proposed here this evening under a special use permit or conditional zoning, both of which would be done in a public forum.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right. We do have some folks signed up for public hearing. Based on the addresses, I think some, if not all, were intending to speak on the item that we've already concluded, being the Saki Express. I'm not sure if they're still here, but I will call out the names and we shall see. Jason Hyos, Going once.
Is it Hayes?
Hayes,
He's for Adams Bluff.
okay. Kelly Soley,
That's me. That was for Adams Bluff.
okay. Ellen Weir,
That's
Wire,
for Adams Bluff.
Adams Bluff. Rose Todd,
Adams Bluff.
and Sean N. Smith. Sean N. Smith, going once. I'm assuming that's Adams Bluff based on the address. So, all right. There being no other public comment, I can entertain a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion by Alex, seconded by Catherine. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are now out of public hearing, and that brings us to the next item, which is consider approval of ordinance to adopt TA 2023-01 Housing Choices Text Amendment. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Can I make that motion first, but do you understand the language that we're looking for? Okay, I'll make the motion with the adding of kind of what we discussed as far as.
So approve as modified with changes to
Motion to
section.
approve as modified as discussed with our city attorney.
Motion by Alex, seconded by Catherine. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And I will also need a motion that the petition is a reasonable request and in the public interest and is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan and land use, housing, and community character.
So moved.
Motion by Charlie, second by Catherine. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. I will just, I would have been comfortable approving it as presented, but I think overall, it's important to get these housing types in the code and allow for these uses, so I'm happy to go along with the motion as amended, so.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for this conversation, and for all of your feedback throughout the entire 3-year process.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Last item on the regular agenda, quarterly finance update, the long-awaited quarterly finance update, and I will recognize our finance director, Jared Piles. Just a question, Miles. You have did Jared beat you in fantasy football or something? You always schedule him at the end of these lengthy meetings. He's got a long drive back. Maybe we could start with him sometime. But
I'm open to that.
Yes. Be that as it may, welcome, Jared. We're glad you're here for this.
After the close.
This eagerly anticipated finance report.
All right, we'll jump right in. First, we'll just highlight some of the things going on in the general fund revenue. Tax collections down as a percentage of the year due to timing. This happens every year. 70% of our levy is collected from November through January. And just for comparison, we had 84% budget remaining in the current year, 83% in prior year. So similar situation as we were in last year. Intergovernmental revenue includes sales tax, utility franchise tax, and alcohol tax. That is also trending as anticipated. Other general fund revenue is up as a percentage of the year due to higher than anticipated earnings from an interest on investments. General fund total of 83% budget remaining in the current year is comparable to the 86% in the prior year. In the water sewer fund, water sewer revenue is coming in as anticipated. Collections and billing has been strong. Budget remaining in the prior year was 82%, and we are at 68% in the current year. So really, really good trends there. And stormwater revenue is coming in also as anticipated, 72% last year, 78% in the current year.
Is that fund balance appropriation, should that be negative 25%?
No, so for revenue, I kind of do it the other, reverse. I didn't want to put negatives. I started doing that a couple years ago, and it caused confusion with there being negative percentages up there.
Well, there's negative percentages up in general fund.
Right.
So if it's 175 minus 25 for the one, why isn't 175 minus 25 for the other?
That's for the variance. So when you're looking at the budget penetration, 68%, I'll just use the water sewer fund as an example. The 68% budget remaining means that we have collected 32% of our revenue, even though we're 25% through the year, so it's trending in the right direction.
Right.
I don't know if
I get it,
yeah.
but I'm just,
I agree with him, I think he's talking about the variance column, the
yeah,
last line item there, the fund balance.
Yeah,
Showing that be a negative 25.
Yeah, it may be, maybe, I'll have to look at my spreadsheet to
Okay.
see what's going on there, but
okay.
sure. But we have not appropriated anything, we've not tapped into the fund balance appropriations yet. So we're just kind of seeing how this year shakes out. The fund balance appropriation is a budgetary item only, so we see how revenue goes through the rest of the year. We may not actually need to tap into the whole 228, but it is there as a reserve, as part of balancing the budget for this year. Any other questions on revenue? As always, I like to highlight local option sales tax, and as usual, when I prepare these slides, we're always a month off, and then whenever I come to present, I have the figures available. So the September distribution total was $560,576, bringing our total collections for the year up to $1.7 million.
So we're seeing that we are facing $100K more than, almost more than $100K more than what we need over the next 10 months, with us heading into our busier seasons for appropriation for that.
Correct, that's how it is currently trending, and we would need an average, rather than the $411 per month over the next 10 months, we need $394,000 over the next 9 to meet budget projections, so that is coming in as
Just to
anticipated.
meet the budget, which means, I mean, again, we only have, 3 months now, so,
Right,
I mean, and then we've got, October, November, December as seasonality starts picking up into that, but, good trend to potentially exceed budget expectations.
yeah, it's averaging just north of $500,000 per month.
Yeah.
Any other questions on sales tax? Okay, we'll highlight some items here in the general fund. The streets department is over as a percentage of the year due to the contracted mowing service being fully encumbered against that budget, so there's no issues noted there. Same with sanitation, that contract is fully encumbered, so you'll see that budget appears to be completely exhausted. But that's the only item in sanitation is the contract with Waste Pro, so it's been fully encumbered against the budget, so you'll see that stay at 0 for the remainder of the year. And then prior year budget penetration was 24%, current year we're at 27%. Water sewer fund, debt service we've not tapped into yet, but we do have debt service payments scheduled on the back half of the year for the AMI project, Clean Water, USDA, West Outfall, and our state revolving loans. Prior year budget penetration in the water sewer fund was 18%, current year is 22%, so slight variance there, but we're still in good shape. And water sewer capital for the year includes a diesel pump installation at the wastewater treatment plant. For stormwater, prior year budget penetration was 15%, current year is 8%. Part of that is due to the capital that's not been recognized yet, so as we finish capital projects, including the Poplar Street rehab, which was actually a capital project fund ordinance that was presented to you all, and the Limestone Drive drainage improvement projects will be completed this year. Any questions on expenditures?
Any calls for concerns or anything like that?
Nope, everything's trending great. One thing I did want to add is we have finished up our fiscal year 25 audit, so that will be submitted to the LGC in the next couple weeks, so this should be our 3rd straight on-time submittal. Then we have our auditors come out by LGC standards 45 days after that has been submitted to the LGC and approved, so you can anticipate the auditors being on site for a meeting sometime in January.
Good job on all your work,
Thank you.
particularly,
So much.
I mean, for folks who are newer, Jerry has moved mountains with Kevin to try to get all this stuff updated for a couple of years.
Yes. At one point, did 4 audits within a single calendar year?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
3.
and he's
4
still
within
here.
18 months, though.
4
Yeah.
within 18 months, yeah.
As far as, I know it's early and the auditors will go through it, but I mean, every year, I know it's not uncommon for the municipalities to get the findings, but we always try to narrow that down so that we get off various,
Unit assistance
Yeah.
list.
what's your temperature on that?
So we met with the LGC last week. We had our UAL coach come on site, reviewed all of our stuff, looked at prior year findings, looked at how we were trending for 2025. They did share with us our scorecard, and we believe that there's a lot of items on that scorecard that will not be scored, at least as heavily with this submittal. We're very hopeful that we'll have less findings, if none at all. So we're keeping our fingers crossed on that. But from his input, he suggested that we're heading in the right direction. We have a good chance of coming off this list. So that would be a slam dunk. I'd be really, really happy about that. We've been pushing for that since I got here.
So we will have another meeting up in the mountains to go sit during the.
That is TBD. So we still are on the
Want to read
list.
some slides?
So we still are on the list because of our audited 2024 financial statements, but it took them almost a year to review that and tell us if we were on the list. So
So it's not a two-way street, we can't go back to them and tell us that they need to be on time to notify us.
correct. So hopefully, and I asked that question when we met with them last week, can we expedite this review? Because if we have a clean submittal with 2025, I don't think it's right to have to wait another year.
Yeah.
If we want to get, even just to get a loan of $50,000, we got to go to the LGC to get approved for that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, obviously, training requirements and reporting requirements that we have to complete as part of being on the UAL, and that's just additional work, time.
Are the findings and terms any less favorable too for the UAL listing?
No, we would still, bid findings.
Just additional reporting, oversight.
Just more hoops to jump through.
Correct, yeah. Any other questions?
No, thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you.
Another road trip, man.
Thank you.
for reading off the slides.
Yeah, so that was for information only, so that brings us to, the newly added item, D1, motion, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143, 318.11A3, to consult with the city attorney and outside counsel and preserve the attorney-client privilege with respect to the cases of Hinckley versus City of Belmont and ASF TAP NC2 LLC versus City of Belmont, and to include outside counsel Pat Flanagan.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by Catherine. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are in closed session. We'll take a few minutes to gather ourselves.
Joe.